Welcome to Heart to Art, the podcast where we delve deep into the creator's journey, the challenges, the triumphs, and of course, the driving force behind the art. Today, I am so excited to have with me Pratap Reddy. He's a Mississauga based writer who immigrated from India, one of my longtime and very respected writer friends who has truly mastered the craft of the short story. And in addition, he also does poetry as well. So I'm so excited to have on Pratap Reddy. And if you love writing and you're interested in short story endings, which I really want to get into, this episode is for you. Welcome, Pratap.
Thank you, Peter. I'm happy to be here, and good evening to all the listeners. And
Thank you. I am so happy to have you here. You've just come out with two new books, a poetry book, Shards of Verse, and of course, this fabulous Remaindered Peoples. So, first of all, as an immigrant, you came to Canada. When did you start writing? Let's start from the beginning.
I always wanted to be a writer, right from my school days. But as usual, like many writers, we tend to put it off, right?
Mhm.
And also, it's all a matter of having leisure, right? You finish school, university, look for a job, and then find a job, marriage, and then, these things go on. When I immigrated to Canada, two things happened. I left my family behind, because this was a leap into the unknown. So they were back in Hyderabad in India, and I came here and found it such a struggle, with so many unexpected obstacles. We never have thought coming from a British Commonwealth country to Canada that you will face so many barriers. My family joined me soon, within, say, I think a year or so. And by then, I got this most important thing is that, that the stimulus to write, it's as if the muse smiled at me when I was in Canada. So I converted all these obstacles to fictional tales, and then I started writing very soon, within 2 years of, uh, landing in Canada. And I also enrolled at Humber School for Writers, which is an excellent place to hone your craft of writing because
Yeah.
you are mentored by the very, very famous and successful writer. In my case, it was Elizabeth Howard, and I got very, very good advice on writing the craft and on publishing and all these things. So I was fortunate that way, and that's how I started writing this immigrant fiction short stories. By the way, I have also written a novel, you know, uh, and then currently I'm working on a novel too. And this novel, I'm glad to say, like I give a wide space, or it's not, it has very little to do with immigration because the three prose books, the two collections and the previous novel had to do everything with immigration. So yeah, I'm
Mhm.
working on a novel which is set in India, and yeah.
And it's hard I'm an immigrant also, as you know, and it's hard to go through things that are difficult and the barriers that immigrants face. But your books, and I've read all of them so far, they're all so rich in the immigrant experience, the barriers, the layers, the nuances. But one thing I wanted to ask before I forget is how you have mastered the short story ending. It's not always easy to do this. I mean, as a short story writer myself, but you've really come up with, I mean, I just love some of your endings. And for people who are interested in this genre, what advice would you give them to master this ending in a short story?
Actually, these endings is like, I mean, not everybody likes it. It's a little controversial, I think, because
Yes.
especially my son, when he was very young, he would read my stories. Nowadays, I mean, he might not be interested. He had this problem with my endings. In one thing he said was, like, the moment your stories begin to get interesting, you shut it off like a, like a tap, so to speak.
I've been accused of that as well.
So, but I suppose one thing is that I used to love reading. So these endings hark back to an earlier period, where Guy de Maupassant and all, where, those endings were very important. I think in modern short stories, there need not be that kind of very powerful ending, that which shuts the door, bolts it, and battens it down, that kind of endings. I don't think it need to have. It can have more fluid. So I wouldn't suggest or recommend to other writers that they follow suit, the way I end it. And another point is that in all my readings, I had this a soft spot for mystery stories, so there, that element of surprise ending is always there. Perhaps that influences me. So that in a way, it makes it unique, and everybody sort of comments on these endings. Sometimes surprising, sometimes like out of the blue kind of things happening at in the last few lines of the story, sort of. So, but
Yes.
people seem to sort of sometimes like it, many seem to like it, and there are some who just sort of bear with it, but the readers are of all types, right? But
Well, that is
there was this one person I'd like to share. He is my colleague's father, a writer from Guatemala. So he liked many of my endings,
mm,
especially the ones I leave it with the reader and expect them to fill up the blanks, So he liked that idea of a shorts where, that I leave it with the reader to sort of. It's not that it is completely like I terminate the story before its logical end. It's just that I leave it has got sort of a little bit of open interpretation, which I leave it with the reader. Yeah.
I noticed that, and I don't want to give your stories away, but in that one story, oh boy, what is the name now? Oh, it's left me. But with the young boy in India, and at the end, I thought, wait a minute, did Pratap just kill off this character? But that was the natural ending, where he fell into a deep sleep. Am I right?
That's true. Okay.
Was a natural ending for this poor boy. And, but there were endings that were funny, that were lighthearted. Um, you had, so many different types of endings, and your stories, dementia, betrayal, love, regret, murder. I mean, it's a book that's just filled with all kinds of stories, which, I highly recommend this book, by the way, everyone. Um, anyway, going back to the book
This
first.
particular story. In a
Yes.
way, it's surprising that you shouldn't recall the title because it has a complicated title. It had many titles down the road. You won't believe me. This story, which is, as you can see, Canada only appears tangentially, right? I wrote it, this story, even before I, years and years before I even thought of immigrating to Canada, by reading a small and sadly a very very small news report of such similar thing happening of a young boy, which is against Indian law
Mhm,
and the labor law to
mhm,
hire such boys. However, one person did die, and this made me write this, I think, little sensational sounding stories which have tempered it down over the years.
mhm,
And you won't believe the coincidence. This was put away, and I never. It's only after publishing my first collection and my novel and all that, and I had a relook at the story. Surprisingly, within those few days, I thought of, you know, giving the story a new lease of life. Again, there was another incident in Indian newspapers of a very similar nature. Again, a very young boy in this factory worker, dying because of ill treatments,
Mhm.
so it was like a signal. So I then sort of, I won't say rewrote it, I polished it, sort of
Mhm.
scraping away all those parts which might not seem, like at this distance looking back at that story, right? So I just sort of smoothing the rough edges, sort of. And then I even changed the title. So it was called The Dream of Brahma. Then that was the third title. And the final title is called Dreams of God, Gods and Men. That's
That's the
because,
story.
yeah, that's a story about that unfortunate boy. Yeah. In a way, it's a story to say that hopes, right? That boy, from whatever station he's in life, he wants to go to a better world. And I
Mhm.
don't know whether at the end of the story, which he went to a better world or not, but that's where I end the story, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it was a beautiful story, and it just, it broke my heart to know that this is probably happening all over the world, child labor, or even in North America or the Western world, where you're sick, but you feel that you have to go to work, especially pre-COVID,
Yeah.
and you fear the repercussions if you don't. So it's a human story, really. I
Thank
think,
you.
yes. Anyway, the book is filled with just humor. It's filled with sadness. Totally loved it. How does We talked about your experiences here? How do your experiences as an immigrant living in Canada from India shape your writing?
Yeah. See, these ideas for a story, right? They come, they kind of descend on you, as many of writers would know, right? It's like a flash, a germ of an idea. And very often, in my case, it's something when my wife is talking about her experiences, right? Then suddenly something she says sort of gives me an idea, that there is potential for the sentence that she used, right? Or that something she is in the process of narrating to me, that this could be turned into a story. And not surprisingly, when she reads my stories and she says, "Isn't this something I told you long, long ago?" Not the entire story, just that she can recognize, right, the inspiration for that. Isn't that, I'm glad that she's not around, that she would claim half the proceeds of my whatever little we earn as writers. So that is about the idea. But I use my experiences in Canada or of immigration to lend authenticity.
Hmm.
The background where I set the characters is something I know very, very well, intimately well, because I think they function in an environment, right, which is very authentic, right? It seems very real, sort of. So my experiences of life, especially in Canada, because I've been here for more than 20 years, I do it to create a very, very convincing frame around which my characters appear.
And your characters are truly amazing and three-dimensional. You know, y- Actually, I should mention to the audience that I've known you for a great part of that time.
Yes,
We met,
yes.
I don't know, maybe 15 or 16 years
One,
ago
yeah,
before,
yeah.
at a writers group, and
Group,
I've
that's right.
seen you grow. I've seen you come up, get your books published. How difficult was it to get traditionally published in Canada?
I always compare it to those efforts we put into find a job when you come to Canada, right? It's all that apply, apply, no reply, how you go, like, and it then turns out that somebody on the street tells you, why don't you apply here? Why don't you? And one of them clicks, and you then just manage to sneak in. The door only opens a maybe a hair's breadth, but it's enough for you to, get into it. Somehow it was like that. I straight away did that Humber School for Writers program, and then even then I was not getting.
Mhm.
And then I was getting all kinds of advice, but one person gave me a very good piece of advice. and that I would like to share is there's a magazine called Anoki, published in Canada and London also, but it's all mostly by South Asian, a very glossy, those high-end kind of, thick paper, that smooth and with all those color ads and all that color pictures and all. She had published my story, one of the first stories, and then, and we were always corresponding, and then I asked her, how does one get a publisher? Then she gave me this very, very important piece of advice, that you must become part of the community of, writers community. That is how I started, becoming members of these various writing, writers groups, and I there were those book clubs and such things, right, where we can meet other writers, aspiring writers, budding writers. That's how I came across Diaspora Dialogues. It's only after Diaspora Dialogues picked up my short story, right, it gave me, and almost simultaneously I won the Mississauga Arts Council's Emerging Writers Award. It was almost together, like the rocket having, twin engined aeroplane or a rocket. When these
Amazing.
two happened, then Guernica, right,
Mhm.
accepted my collection of stories, and that's how it was. So Guernica has been a publisher for me. Even my third prose book, whereas my volume of poems it was a self-published effort. So Guernica has been my publisher since then. Yeah.
Before I get to your poetry book, you just gave the most amazing piece of advice that every young person, well, every person who wants to do anything should get together with a group of like minded people. That is such an important part of the journey because we don't really accomplish anything alone, right?
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
it in community. But with Shards of Verse, your poetry book, why did you decide to self publish that one?
See, since I'm used to this of approaching traditional publishers, right, which I did anyway for this book too, but I know there is that gestation period, right? You submit your manuscript. If you're lucky, 6 months later they will say yes, and then the book sees the light of day after 2 years. That's how it is with traditional publishers. Sometimes more too, if COVID has come or some repercussion of some incident or train of events which we have no control of, it can even postpone that.
Yes,
So
yes.
after I sent out my manuscript, I just saw this, as usual, the newsletter from Mississauga Arts Council, right?
Mhm.
Asking for uh, or telling us about their micro grants. And there was just 2 or 3 days left. Then it just occurred to me, and should I apply for it? But again, once again, we have this writers community, right? Courtney Park. So I asked one of the Courtney Park writers, what do you think of this? The person said, why don't you do it? Go ahead and do it. So
Mhm.
I had these poems, so which some one or two of them were published in individual magazines, right?
Mhm.
So I applied to Mississauga Arts Council. It was end of October. Middle of November, I think I got the grant, and then middle of December, I had this book ready, published, so that I could peddle my books. Right, we need to hustle literally to sell our books, and then for the that Christmas, that holiday season, I could sell my books. I didn't have to wait 2 years for my book to come out. And also during COVID, right, during the pandemic, it didn't help me as a writer. Working from home, writing from home was all too much, because I used to work as a financial analyst and underwriter, always staring at the computer screen, right? And quite a demanding job it was. So again, in the same location, I couldn't just, you know, doff this hat, a professional hat of an underwriter, and then become a writer, and then again spend time with my laptop. I just couldn't do it. So those were
That's
the, actually I call them, dismal years of my writing career. But
Mhm.
this book helped, this volume of poems, right? At least it bridged the gap between Ramya's Treasure, my novel published in 2018, and
Love that
my,
as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and then my new collection of stories which came out, Reminded People, right, which came out this year. Sort of there was another book now in between these two. So I don't feel bad, as a writer, there is some sort of some progress I see in my sort of
Absolutely,
writing
you're
practice. Like,
prolific. I think you just described a problem that a lot of people have. Well, I have it anyway, right? Moving from staring at the screen all day in your job and then having to look at the screen again to do your writing. What advice would you give people who have to, switch gears like that? And what did you do that helped you?
see, since I have confessed to this weakness, I'm the person least qualified to give advice. But however, you know, uh, even earlier when weather permitting, I was written, so too was Ramya's Treasure. I was working full time, right? So I would most of the time wake up early and then do my writing, and then get ready and then go to work, and come back sometimes. But after a day at work, I find that that energy level is low. So many people work late in the night. I have also done that. But as you age, right, that kind of energy you might not find end of the day, right? Too, and the labor of typing it out might be less, but it needs a lot of thinking, right? You sit with the character, the set of characters and wondering what next, and it is a lot of work.
It
So
is.
this end of the day is something I found it difficult. So even now, it's early morning that I write. I'm most productive. It
Mhm.
is hard changing gears, but then we need to do it, right? It is as essential as breathing, because a writer cannot live just on his writing unless you are very, very lucky. You are a blessed person, right? So we need to do that, right? It
You've,
is, you have to sort of find time
yes,
and manage it somehow. If you want to be a writer, it is sacrifice, right? You
it
have to
is.
do it. It is a sacrifice, and it's also of adjusting, and you need to have the determination and persistence, right? Writing takes a long time, right? You can't simply dash off a novel in few weeks time. There are people who can do it, but at least not the majority of us. Yeah.
Admittedly, I'm struggling with this issue right now, and I'm glad that you described the life of a writer and how much determination it does take, and how long the actual process is. Because a lot of young people think, well, oh, I just want to be a writer, without realizing that it is one of those things that the rewards come at the end of a long journey, not at the end of a day,
Yeah.
or at the end of 2 weeks or something like that with a regular paycheck. It's
And
very different.
also it might not come at all sometimes, right? Even not everybody succeeds, and therefore you must have that resilience also. You
Yeah,
write a novel, it doesn't get published, you put it aside and then move on to another
absolutely.
work. It could be a short story, poem, another novel, but you keep writing. That
Hmm.
is the important thing, because as you write you become better, I'm sure. Like any other craft or any other vocation, the more you write the better you're becoming. So your later books will stand better chance than your first book, though you might have put your entire life into your first book, right? But
Hmm.
writing is by itself a learning and developing process, right, where you grow as a writer. So my advice is don't give up. Keep writing. Just
A lot
persevere.
of
Keep
gems.
writing.
Yes, you've dropped a lot of gems and advice for writers in this episode. How has your writing evolved? You said you get better, but do you see a change from when you first started to now?
I, it's very, very obvious for me, especially since I come from another country, right? See, there the idea of literature, right, which goes back thousands of years, continuous history of. So we write. whether it's English or Telugu or in a different way. Okay, and also it is a very Victorian sort of English, British way too. Where there is English language and there is the influence of other languages like Greek and Latin on it. You know, of other contemporary language like French, especially in British. Uh, English. So we try to we are imitative of those styles. Whereas if I were to write in Telugu, there is this influence of Sanskrit on it, ancient language, just as English has Greek and Latin, and there are contemporary languages like English and Persian and Urdu influencing it.
Mhm.
So we write in a different way because their writing is a very, very different department as opposed to talking, speaking. It's an art form and it has definite and strong features. Whereas here, I think it is people expect it closer to American, I think, where so our style should be little conversational, right? It should not be forbidding you. It's not like you're looking at something a great and intricate and attractive piece of work. Rather, it could be imaginative but very familiar too.
Mhm.
Even then, my stories, they kind of reflect my past, right? They tend to seem to be a little overwritten, my stories, and I'm not ashamed of it because that's how I grew up. That was the culture I'm used to, but I'm
Mhm.
trying to improve. So I think there is a kind of a nice mixture of
I
that
found that,
that
yes.
big that old overhang of classical language and then this modern idiom, right? So
I did
I
see
think it's
that.
sort of, yeah.
And I love that in your work because it gives you a very specific voice. But before I forget, you also are the master of the metaphor. Is that something that comes naturally to you? I mean, I'm thinking of a line right now about her heels clacking like castanets on the marble floor,
Yeah.
and other things. You had many of them throughout. How did you learn how to do that? Or is this something that comes naturally to you from, observation, linking ideas?
Yeah. So actually, the word observation, right? It is connected with that. So when I imagine a scene, I used to be, when I was young, I used to be a quite a proficient, in art painting, that as a kid. So that was my first artistic expressions, which I used to paint, right? So when I write, I have this picture in front of me. And this picture also has sound, smells, and all that because we need to have as a writer. It's not just a dimensional picture in front of me. So I have this picture, and then I describe the picture and make sure I include smells and sounds also. So it is the visual. That's why I think many people are struck by the powerful images in my stories, right? And this is how I write. It's not a trade secret, but I see a picture, but I have this in my mind that it's more than a picture. Then I must describe other things too to make it alive and real. Yeah.
Such incredible advice for anyone embarking on a writing career. Absolutely amazing. I am so glad that you were able to spend this afternoon with me. You just gave us so much things that we can work with to improve our writing, from observation to using the senses, the discipline. Thank you so much, Pratap. I wish you
I,
so much success with
I
this
should
book
thank you.
and with Shards of Verse. All your information will be up for anyone who's interested in ordering because you do have several. You have another short story collection, the novel, and then your upcoming novel. What is your upcoming novel going to be about, by the way?
At the core of it, right? I wanted to write about this Me Too phenomena, right?
Hmm.
Which actually started in the West. But like many ideas, whether it's Coca Cola, Hollywood films, it has, legs, and it moves to other parts of the world. And in India, it went there and created a lot of sensation, sort of. So I wanted to write about that phenomenon when I thought of writing something about India. So it was there. So that is what the novel is about. But otherwise, too, for me, characters are very important. And I've given it a title, working title, but I think that's what it will have. I called it Praful's Errands, like
Mhm.
punning on fool's errands, and Praful is an Indian name. So
Okay.
about this character, it's about it's like a build, what they call a Bildungsroman. Also, he's an orphan. Then how he moves up in life to become a very successful and a rich man, a business magnate, as they would call it. And it's about his life too, sort of, with me too as an add-on to it. So this
Okay.
is what that book is. But then
Excited.
it's a novel. It's you just this is the well of ideas which you have, and a writer, you dive into it, and then let's see how I surface and where I find the bank to So
I am
I don't know how the final product will look, but I'm three-fourth of the way, almost four-fifth of the way into that novel. Yeah,
yeah, I'm very excited to read that. And, you really, as a reader, you really know when you're in a good story, when we feel like we are so immersed in your culture that we could even be part of that culture. And well, that is the beauty of reading. And I really felt myself immersed in your stories. I felt that I was there
thank
with
you.
the characters. Yes, I was there. It was so joyful reading this book. Thank you so much, Pratap, for coming on.
I
And
must, sorry.
go
Go.
ahead.
No, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity,
My
and
pleasure.
I'm indebted to you. As writers, we need a leg up, right? We need to meet more potential readers, and after all, there's so much of competition. You walk into an Indigo bookstore, how many titles you see,
So
and
true.
they keep on changing, right?
Mhm.
And so that's
Yes.
why. Thank you. Sorry for interrupting. You were saying
No,
something.
no, I was just thinking there will never be enough lifetimes to read all the things that I want to read. But it's doing this for other authors is such a joy to me, because I do want to increase the readership, especially when your work just strikes something in me. I want to share that with everyone. So thank you so much. And for the listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please share, please subscribe, like, comment. We'd love your feedback. Thank you so much, Pratap.
Thank you.